Hey guys, Ray here from Regards Ray. So, how have you been? Oh, me? Oh, I've been good. Actually, I've been a bit addicted to eating Costco nuts lately because have you tried them? They're so good and yet so fattening. If you can, get the ones from Costco specifically because believe me, they hit differently. Anyway, today I thought it'd be great to talk about loneliness. It's something a lot of people deal with, especially nowadays, so I thought I'd share with you how I've personally overcame my own fear of being alone. If you're new to this channel, we talk about things that change our thinking and change our actions so we can make a real change in our lives. So if you're on the journey of self-awareness and self-improvement, please subscribe. Anyway, onward ho we go. Being alone, how I learned to love it. To be honest, I used to have a paradoxical relationship with being alone. Because I'm an introvert, I enjoy being alone. But ironically, I'd also feel lonely. Well, lonely doesn't quite describe the feeling I felt. I felt left out and desolate and empty, almost as if I've been abandoned. I know, weird, right? I mean, how can a person both love and hate being alone? At any given moment, I would want to be alone but be anxious when I was. The dark fact was, I constantly felt completely alone, no matter how many friends and family I was with. I felt like no one understood me or even cared to. Well, the good news is I no longer feel deeply lonely like this because, as I'll discuss more later, I discovered that being with people that misaligns with your energy can leave you feeling like this. Anyway, I used to lie awake at night with my eyes wide open, thinking about how I die alone with my corpse rotting quietly. It was definitely worse when I had an especially anxious day. For reference, I'm married and I've chosen to be child-free. So when my husband and I let people know that we've chosen not to have children, they'd ask, who'd take care of you when you're old? And I guess this got to me because I'd lie awake in terror, wondering the same thing. What if my husband dies before me and I'm left all alone? Who would come and check up on me? I mean, who would even care? What if I die and no one discovers my body until months later? I mean, it was a real terror for me to think about this possibility since I've read that it actually happens in real life. There are so many news articles of old people dying and no one finding out until they smell a body rotting from their apartment. Ugh. Then years passed and my spiritual awakening intensified. My fear of being alone and dying alone dissipated when my spiritual awakening intensified. Not only did it disappear, being completely alone became one of my greatest happiness. Several years back, I was forced to face my fears of being alone. I had to live alone in a new city where I didn't know anyone because I had to relocate for a job. And for a long time, because I was living alone and I didn't have friends, I spent a lot of time by myself, reading a lot of spiritual books and listening to a lot of spiritual teachers and exploring the city on foot. And I found myself withdrawing from talking to my friends back home because I felt that they didn't understand the spiritual awakening I was going through. So for the first time in my life, I was completely alone. Looking back, I think my spiritual awakening intensified because I was spending a lot of time discovering my inner self. And my introverted nature really started to thrive in so much alone time. When I was forced to face my fear of being alone, like most fears, it turned out that I was terrified by the idea of it rather than actually being alone. In fact, I found myself enjoying it. And it was ironically one of the best ways to feel connected and feel like you belong, like you're truly home. How I discovered that being alone is so pleasurable. Like I said before, I discovered that being alone is one of the best ways to feel connected to the all. It's one of the most intimate moments you can ever have where you feel completely connected with yourself, with the world at large, with the universe, with the all. One of the best times I had was I would walk from the office to my home, which was about a 3-mile hike alongside a bay, a creek, and a river. So each morning, I'd wake up an hour early to hike to the office. And that sort of became my morning walking meditation. The neighborhood was still quiet and sometimes not even awake. I'd feel the crisp morning air against my cheeks. The sun would be out, but it wasn't warm yet, so it was so nice. And there would be so many plants and animals along the way, just quietly existing and expressing their beauty under the morning sky. And I felt so incredibly alive and connected with everything. When I arrived at the office, I felt centered, calm, and connected and content. And ironically, after spending that morning time, I felt more connected with the people there. I felt like I'm connecting with their essence and not so much their ego, if you know what I mean. This might sound esoteric, but being by yourself, you can feel the connection with the invisible. You can feel that all is you and you are in all. It's an incredibly connected feeling, so overwhelmingly full and overflowing. And that's something that you can only feel when you're quiet and alone. I discovered that that's how our energy is. We're all connected underneath, but we don't feel that we are when we're with other people because we feel our differences more acutely. Neil Donald Walsh put it perfectly in his book, Conversation with God. Let's say you're blindfolded and someone's taking you from room to room. And just by the smell of the room, you identify which room you're in. You walk into a room and it smells like last night's cooking, so you know it's the kitchen. You walk into another room and it smells like sleep, so you know it's the bedroom. But when you take off the blindfold, you don't know where the air of the kitchen ends and the air of the living room begins because they're all just one clump of air. But when you are blindfolded, your mind is so focused on distinguishing between different rooms that it all feels different. I feel like that's how we usually are. We're so focused on what's different that we don't feel like we're all connected and part of the all, since that feeling is more subtle and nuanced. When you're alone and without distraction, you can feel the connection between you and yourself, you and the objects in your home, you and the nature outside, you and humanity as a whole, the energy, the space, etc. When I felt this connection, my fear of being alone disappeared. I discovered that being alone isn't bad or scary, which is what I had thought before, but it's actually very satisfying and pleasurable. It's rejuvenating and revitalizing. So it really redefined the concept of being alone for me. The key to not feeling alone is to spend as much time as possible feeling connected. Most people usually try to get this feeling of connectedness through people. So they hang out with people and try their best to fit in, even though those people might not necessarily see who you really are or understand the person that you are. So ironically, hanging around the wrong people can make you feel lonelier. Over the years, I've realized that trying to get your loneliness filled by an external source, like people or stuff, just doesn't work. It's like trying to fill an empty well by pouring water into it from the outside. It's not going to work. You can only get filled through a source that comes from within you. And that's what you discover when you're alone. Final thoughts. I know your circumstances might not allow you to live alone and to naturally discover the feeling of connectedness like I did. But I'm not going to leave you dry here. I've compiled some tips for you. So here's tip number 1. Start by taking a walk alone in nature. I found that it's usually easier than sitting alone in the house meditating. When you're meditating, you can get to that point where you feel connected with everything. But it's harder than walking in nature because you have to quiet your mind and you have to be still enough for you to enter into that meditative state. But when you are in nature, it's easy to feel one with it because everyone probably experienced this one time or another. So spend time feeling connected and being one. Tip 2. Do an activity that puts you in the flow. Whatever you do to be in the flow, do that. When you're in the flow, you're connected with the energy that's surging through you, and you're not getting in the way of the flow of that current. In that quiet connection, you'll feel yourself disappear and merge with the all. Tip 3. Spend time petting your pets and tending to your plants. Pets and plants have a spaciousness about them because they're in a constant state of connectedness. So it's so infectious. That's why it's so easy to zone out when you're petting your pets, and it's easy to quiet your thoughts. It'll be easier for you to feel connected in this state. And finally, if you're afraid of being alone, you have to face your fears and actually be alone. So consciously spend some time being alone. Once you're alone, you'll find out that you're never really alone. You're never really disconnected. You're never really separated. And that it's only the idea of being alone that had scared you. All right, guys, that brings us to the end of those tips. Comment down below if you have any tips of your own. I'd love to hear what worked for you. Maybe you have something that I didn't touch upon here. I'd love to know. I still need tips myself. So please comment that down below. And like always, thank you for watching my video. As a small-time YouTuber, I really appreciate each and one of your support. And until next time, regards, Ray.